Ladies and gentlemen, in deference to the school teacher, which I once was for 30 years, we're going to start in 5 minutes' time. Thank you for being here, and I thought I'd be here first and wait for you to join me. So 6:15 we go. Thank you. So we've got a minute to go. What we'll do, good people, in a minute's time, since this is apparently going to be recorded, we shall cheat the system for editing purposes. And normally, speakers are introduced, and then when they come on, there is rapturous applause, and then everything begins. You're delighted to see me. So we'll do just that. I'm going to walk off, and then and you've got to look as if, I don't know, Superman's just. Good cue. Okay. Your moment in Hollywood is about to start. When you see me, unalloyed delight. That's really good. That's really good. You're good at taking direction. Ladies and gentlemen, young people, boys and girls, thank you for that utterly contrived introduction. The first thing I must say is what a tremendous pleasure it is for me to stand like some sort of Greek king, Zeus or somebody, with my face represented at the back there in form of caricature as the face of KidFest 2024. My name is John Sibi-Okumu, and for those of you who came to the opening ceremony, I said a few words then, which I shall repeat. The I in KidFest stands for international. And when I was asked what I would really like to talk about today, I said we have guests. And in my culture and in my mother tongue, there is a saying to the effect that a guest is a god in your home. So there are several gods in our home here in Kenya, and they will represent my target audience. I'm speaking to the guests to the festival, and the plan is I want to rabbit on for about 40 minutes and engender a conversation that should last more than my presentation. So the way we saw it, 20 to 30 minutes of me just saying things to you and then asking for you to make a comeback to what I have to say. As for the topic of discussion, that's also a big deal. The buzzword these days is that we, Africans in particular, should be telling our own story. The thing to do is to tell our own story. For far too long we've been shackled. For far too long we've been under the yoke of colonialist thinking, and it's time for us to tell our own story. The big challenge for me is to ask myself, what exactly does that mean? Is telling my own story, telling you about the village I came from, how I was born, how my mother fed me in the first 6 weeks of my life, does that legitimize my creative product? Do I tell a story that people who are not Kenyan will not necessarily appreciate? Do I tell a story which is my own story because of the color of my skin, which excludes people who do not happen to define themselves as being black? If there are black people in it, everything is fine. If there's somebody who looks like that woman over there, she doesn't belong, she can't be Kenyan. If there's somebody who looks like this woman over here at the front, she doesn't belong because she can't be Kenyan, she's not part of my story. So we are on a stage and we're talking about performance, the idea of coming onto a stage and giving a performance and acting and taking a bow at the end in what is traditionally known as proscenium arch theatre. Little box, entrances to the left, to the right, come in, downstage, upstage, downstage. This is the theatre, which is the home, the sacred home, which we've come to accept as the place of performance. And we're meant to be into eternal youth, and nobody grows old anymore, and nobody mentions age, but I will mention my age because it has everything to do with what I have to say. Regardless of all the beauty creams and facelifts that I've had over the last 10 years, I can happily reveal that I was born in July 1954. So one of the great claims to fame and fortune is that I was born in the same year as Denzel Washington. I'm 5 months older. I was born in the same year as John Travolta, and I was born in the same year as Oprah Winfrey. But I'm poorer than all three of them. So that's a qualification. Now, I want to start off in this story about the challenges to telling our own story. I wish to be in some way the hero of my own narrative, because it has everything to do. The program of KidFest 2024 says we're delighted to have John Sibi-Okumu as the face of KidFest 2024 because in many ways he represents the journey that we've traveled as Kenyans. And that journey is an important journey, but it's a relatively short nationalistic journey. As I have said, this country, for our guests, became independent on December the 12th, 1963. Therefore, when my country became independent, I was 9 years old. And if you've done the maths, I am now 70 years old. So, how did I end up on stage? It's got something to do, and I hope the phone doesn't go off in the middle of the thingy-bob, so I'll try and switch it off before it goes off. How did I end up on stage? It has everything to do with the legacy, the baggage that we carried onto the stage. And this is the storytelling bit. The idea nowadays, you've got to tell stories, don't just give a lecture, tell stories. People love stories. So welcome to John Sibi-Okumu, the storyteller. When I was born in 1954, my father, Daddy, went off as one of the pioneering Africans from this country who went to study the law in the UK. And he went off to London and left me and my mother, my mummy, in the village. And we're very much in the village, barefoot, eating termites in the rainy season, hunting birds and all the rest of it the little kids do, and off he went. And I never saw my father again in the manner of Barack Obama until I was 7 in 1961. And for any number of reasons that would be explained in a full-length autobiography, my father asked my mother and me to join him when I was 7. And I'd never gone to school. Therefore I didn't know how to read, I didn't know how to write. And there I was, kitted out in a pair of shoes and a little coat and things that do to get onto a plane to go to the UK. And I landed in the UK as a 7-year-old and ended up in North London in a place called Stoke Newington, which to this day is called London N16. We had a little address there called 47 Carrisford Road, and I had to go to school. Now, everybody said, this kid is 7, and he can't count and he can't read. We can't put him back in kindergarten because he's too old. So let him make a muck about and let him discover himself. Put him in year 3. So here I am in year 3. I can't read, I can't write, and it was no shock to the system that when I got my first report, and I didn't know a word of English, this is a habitual coffee table anecdote of mine, my first report read every single subject, said poor, another one was poor, P-O-O-R, the other one was poor, and I thought, this must be really good. This represents the real me. I'm very self-confident, and I'm getting this description for each and every subject. And my dad, God rest his soul, it's around about winter, when he got this report, it was a wintry sort of day, he took me to the window with my mummy sort of weeping and wailing and hung me from a height, because we were on a sort of second floor, and said, dangling me literally, saying, kid, if ever you get a report like this again, I'm going to drop you to the ground. So those were the days when parents weren't taking counseling. Spare the rod and spoil the child. But I sort of got the message. And the first message that I got was that I had to work really hard at learning a language which wasn't my own. So I speak English very much the way I do now because of that early beginning. All of a sudden, English became my language of thought, my language of communication, my language of everything. And somewhere in William Patton Junior Mixed School, the only school in 1961 for mixed blacks, yellows, a mixed school. We're talking England, London, 1961. And I get into this school and I learn, and I'm not saying that I'm a latter-day genius, but by the time I left the place, I was sort of like winning prizes for things. And everybody said, oh, that clever little boy from darkest Africa, he's now leaving us to go back into the wilds of the tropics. And one of the things that I did was there was Mr. Green. Mr. Green, having seen me as this brown-eyed boy, said, we're doing a little school play, and you and a little Jewish girl, who was the first woman of my affections, I was really besotted by this Jewish girl, we would be doing the presentation for the end of year gathering at school. And I was to be a soldier, and she was to be a young woman in love with me. And I had to stand initially like this, waiting for her to come and sing this song to me and bring a succession of outfits that I would wear. So for those of you who are steeped in English culture, the song went something like this. Soldier, soldier, won't you marry me with your musket, fife and drum? How can I marry such a pretty girl as you when I have no shoes to put on? So off she, you can see the thing. She grins and brings me some shoes, brings me a coat, and at the end of the day declares that I declare to her that I'm already married. So it was a sort of pointer to the real world. But it was, when you talk about when was I first on stage, that was it. And when I look back on it, I must have been about 9, because I'd got there at 7, so I had to learn English and everything. I can't quite, but that was it. And the bug came on, and the bug came on of the things that I could learn. Maths wasn't going to be it, physics wasn't going to be it, because I couldn't make head or tails of pounds, shillings and pence as a 7-year-old. So I made a conscious decision that the sciences weren't for me. And I gravitated then and thereafter to the world of words. And languages were my thing, because that's where I could win the prizes, that's why I could do the recitations. And when we came back to Kenya 3 years later, I went, because my father now was a lawyer, he was a nutter barrister of Lincoln's Inn. We were in a situation where I was in a rank of privilege. So I went to a school, and I won't be naming names throughout because they've got nothing to do with the anecdote, but I went to a school where only I and a half-sister whom I'd had, my dad had had a child with a British woman, we were the only people of color in this school. So again, there was this, and there again, I stood out, and I was, reciting things, and was put on stage as some kind of exhibit like they have in museums in Belgium, big sort of Hottentot with a big ass, that kind of thing. So that it was a bit like that in terms of, but I got used to the idea of performing. And one day, for the school speech day at my primary school, there was a gentleman called Robert Beaumont, who belonged to the Kenya School's broadcasting division of the Voice of Kenya, where long before YouTube and whatever, you taught lessons in class on the radio at preordained times. Yes, you told these anecdotes and kids listened. So there was English, and I was co-opted as child talent to go in with a little Cockney accent and see if I could read, the part of the pit in Great Expectations. So I sort of, really worked out my Cockney accent, and there I was, Kenya School's broadcasting division as the Great Pip. And Robert Beaumont, who was one of the sort of pioneer amateur actors in Kenya, and Roma Barraclough, for those of you who watch the BBC, there are barracloughs all over the sort of children of the woman called Roma, who was the mother of the barraclough of our days, who was seconded by the British government to teach Kenyans how to run a station. So then again, the point of luck, when I give talk to schools, the idea of luck, I wasn't, you need luck, you need opportunity, and at every turn, without having had any kind of foreknowledge, I was lucky enough to be put in a sort of Forrest Gump situation where I meet Muhammad Ali, I'm there with Eisenhower, if you've seen the movie. I'm there at the crucial moment. So I'm now at the crucial moment where I'm going to be broadcasting to the country at large. Tiny little boy, then somebody comes up to me and said, oh, this clever little boy speaks English so well, he needs to have elocution lessons. Elocution lessons. And my headmistress at the time, Miss June Parker, said my brown-eyed boy must go for elocution lessons. So again, the luck. These guys were paying for me to come to the building opposite here, Ukumbi Mdogo, to have elocution lessons. And I was told how to pronounce my R's and make sure that if I ended a word with a consonant, I was sure to pronounce it, and I was not to chew up the ends of my words, and I was to learn how to breathe properly, not properly, but properly, and so on and so forth. We then go from that, and again, my father says, you're an African, you spent all your time in Timbuktu, you should go to a good African Catholic school to make yourself a real African. And I am going to sign up for you to go to Mangu Boys School. And my headmistress, Ms. June Parker, would say, my dear little boy, Mangu, he's not going to Mangu, he's going to, and I was going to go to another school, which was also all white, and still exists to this day. And again, the first African in that particular post-colonial school went to it in 1964. So now I was going into it 3 years later, the first generation of black students in this all-white school. Huge theatrical tradition, every year inter-house drama competition, prizes, and one of the people who came to judge the inter-schools drama festival, and my dear friend Millicent Ogutu probably is hearing this for the first time, one of the people who came to judge our drama festival was a gentleman called James Falkland. So again, when James came along, he said, oh, wonderful acting, and he gave me the prize for the best actor and made sure that once I left school, he would co-opt me when he was the director of the National Theatre. So luck rears its head again, because when I leave school, we've done plays in the repertoire like The Crucible, and I'm the prompter, sitting in the wings, telling the seniors what to do. One of our teachers writes something, we do The Royal Hunt of the Sun, but everything in the European canon, in the European repertoire. And whenever my high school came to compete on a national level, we were the pariah status. All the judges would say, these people, they've lost their culture. Look at them, they're doing the long, short, and the tall. And you know, our own Kivuda Kibwana, later to become a governor, has written this play called Utisi. They win the cup, and these horrible spoon-fed colonial rejects, we were told that what we're doing was rubbish because it wasn't relevant to the story. Remember the theme of that it wasn't relevant to the story. So the Shakespeare, whom I had grown to know and love and had excelled at in school, I mean, I could go up and you know, all of a sudden it's like you've been eating a meal. I could go and say, in sooth, I know not why I'm so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. But how I caught it, found it, came by it. What stuff 'tis made of, I am to learn. And such a want with sadness makes of me that I have much ado to know myself. Oh, your mind is tossing on the ocean, there where your Argus is. And this is what I lived on. and now it was being rejected out of hand as so much crap. So that was a bit of counseling was needed there. And now we progress to the Falkland, coming back and setting up what was the very first manifestations of the theatre in this. And in 1973, at the age of 19, I made my theatrical national debut on this national theatre stage as Romeo, opposite a white Juliet. And in those days, you had theatre groups, theatre companies that were made basically of what we called wazungus, white people, who were continuing their tradition and putting on plays that made sense to them. And here I was, a black guy, who in audition was deemed good enough to play Romeo. And again, with a whole thing of relevance, Steenie, you will remember this maybe, all over the walls of the National Theatre were the signatures of great English actors like Sir Ralph Richardson, who had come to Kenya. And the first thing, the first act of rebellion was to, there was a group of people, a sort of kamikaze mob of people, who came into this theatre with tins of black paint and waited for a big moment when somebody like Michael Pundo had left the doors of the thing open and poured black paint all over these things and destroyed them, because we had become independent and we were going to tell our own story. But remember, I had been exposed, and my experience of the theatre was from a totally alien perspective. It had nothing to do with my being African. It just had to do with shows and words that I thought were really quite neat, that I liked to perform in. So James Falkland, that self-same man, takes over another repertory theatre called the Donovan Moore, run by the family of one Annabel Moore, who is still alive with us and is 103 years old, in a home somewhere here in Nairobi. And we did our first shows, again, as enlisted cohorts of the great James Falkland. I and names like Steve Mwenesi, who was my classmate at school, we were the first people to be deemed to be good enough to play. So I did Midsummer Night's Dream, The Merchant of Venice, and Steve played Othello. But again, the running tag is that we were sellouts, because we weren't telling our own story. So there comes a point in my time where I take the mantle and they say, well, John, why don't you write some plays? I said, you've been in 40 plays, you've directed however many number, you've been a school teacher, albeit of French in some school, because I went to specialize as a French speaker and manipulator. Why don't you write a book of plays? So I obliged over a period of time and came out with J.E. Sibi-Okumu Collected Plays 2004 to 2014, which I believe, a little plug, you can buy at the end of this session. You will buy at the end of this session for 1,500 bob. Get your MasterCards out, because the bookseller is here with us. So here we are, and I'll sign them. So here, look at this, because I'm going through a potted history. Look at this. On the cover, the foreword is written by Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Now, for anybody who knows anything about literature, Ngugi wa Thiong'o is the Kenyan who has been put up for the Nobel Prize not once, but 3 times. Not won it, but he's been deemed worthy of succeeding Wole Soyinka, Naguib Mahfouz, Nadine Gordimer, J.M. Coetzee as the Africans who had won the Nobel. And, significantly, Ngugi was my teacher. So again, the luck in the sense that the people who taught me when I went to the University of Nairobi were the pioneers, the pace setters. I can say that I was taught by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. We did D.H. Lawrence's, I'll think of the name, but Sons and Lovers in the tutorials. I was taught by Michere Mugo I was taught by John Ruganda, I was taught by David Rubadri, and in all that time we were seeing performances from other countries. So Robert Serumaga, who Idi Amin sort of like chopped up or poisoned and put in a fridge, he came and did marvelous things for us, Charles Mukulu. But there was this idea of seeing theatre from another African country. So that's the preamble, the anecdotal preamble about me. And I'm sorry to have gone on for so long about my own self. Before the 4,000, 50,000 word autobiography comes out, be sure to buy it. What then, having given you that potted thing, what then are the challenges to telling our own story to the Kenyan stage? I've given you, the grand old man of Kenyan theatre. If somebody else had been here but he's unwell, we should invite David Mulwa, who is slightly older than I am, 4 or 5 years maybe, but with whom we were on this stage doing Joe de Graaf's Muntu, the inaugural production of Joe de Graaf's Muntu, with the great Joe de Graaf of Ghana, who features in Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, whom she met there. The great Joe de Graaf was sort of lecturer in exile who wrote this play, which was a seminal play. What are the challenges which I presume to inhabit the creative process where we are? And I've let on that for 30 years of my life, I was a high school teacher of French. So most teachers have lesson plans, and most teachers prepare for their lessons. Some don't. They sort of get drunk and seduce their pupils, but that's another, I didn't fall into that category. The lesson plan goes something like this. 5 C's. 5 C's. Craft, questions around craft. How are we to produce, rather to improve the quality of our performers? Is it enough just to be talented, or do you need a certain skill? And are we going to, from our own midst, provide those skills, or are we going to have people like my dear son, as he could be, Ogutu Muraya, who then goes and studies abroad, and then we come back and say, well, you don't really belong here because you've got your PhD from the University of Nuremberg. Go back to where you come from, you alien sellout. But he's been to school. I'm going to revisit them. Content, the challenge to our theatre. Are we going to have more and more plays written for us as Kenyans? And are they going to be published? Are they going to be preserved? My collection of 6, my measly collection of 6 full-length plays, I'm not saying this is an idle boast, I do believe that it is the only such publication since Kenya became independent. There isn't another collected plays by XY, Kinyanjui, Kamau and Nyango in the bookshops. So that's a bit of a challenge, don't you think? That we haven't got that far. Community. Who are we as Kenyans? Who are we as Kenyans going to invite to be our audiences? And are these audiences, are people who come to watch our plays, are they going to come to watch our plays because by definition they are an elite? They are the haves in the sort of Guguadiongo parlance. The haves versus the have-nots in sort of Marxist dialectical materialism, the lumpen, all that kind of. Or here we are walking in, sitting in this room. What about the people in the villages who haven't seen the Proscenium March. And in a country like Kenya, who have a choice of, I believe, it depends who you talk to, they can either have 50 languages or 100 languages, 100 different legitimate peoples. Who are our audiences? Country, C for country. What is our relationship with the state? Ngugi wa Thiong'o is no longer here with us because in 1973 or something, he wrote a play which was somewhat critical of government, that sort of said, you know, the government was milking people of resources and the people were being outdone. And for his pains, he spent some time in prison and then was, rather ironically, adopted by the United States of America, the country which he'd been spending his time condemning as sort of the land of imperialist pigs. And there he was, and he's remained in the land of imperialist pigs ever since. And it took a white man sitting in this audience, it took Stuart Nash to resurrect the offending play. How many years later was it, Stuart? Maybe 40 years later. 45. 45 years later, good people, think about these statistics, to have a classic of the Kenyan canon reproduced. It took another of our great writers. We had Francis Mbuga's Betrayal in the City, and again, guess who directed it? You can be as dismissive as you can. It's that awful white man, Stuart Nash. Where are our directors? Well, sorry, I was on sick leave when he took on the job. So it's a problem. It's a problem. And then the last thing which I wish to invoke is C for continent. And on this, I would say that everywhere I go in the world, when I catch a plane, everybody defines me as being African. They're not really interested in the specificity of knowing that I'm Kenyan. For a great part, they don't know where Kenya is, to tell you the truth. They're very educated. You know, they've been to MIT, like my newfound friend Tien, but they don't know where Kenya is. Tien is here, now she knows where it is, but I wonder whether a year ago she did. So this is a challenge to us as well. Why, oh why, and I'm not going to name names, I have written to directors in other African countries, and I won't name the countries, but I found out and I said, oh, my name is, Jiminy Cricket, and I come from Kenya, and I'm a playwright, and I want to send you a copy of my collected plays. Is there a way we could do a collaboration? Could I come to whichever country and put on my plays? The answer has always been negative. In the time since I saw Serumaga's Renga Moi, there have been no overtures to cross-pollinate with a director from Uganda or Tanzania or Ethiopia. And I'm being honest with myself. I'm being honest with myself and saying, if I were asked to name some African playwrights, I would say Athol Fugard, Sizwe Banzu is dead, sort of Master Harold and the Boys, The Blood Knot, about two brothers who, yes, heard of him. I've mentioned Serumaga, I've mentioned Charles Mukulu, and I'm talking for myself. Having mentioned Fugard and Rubadiri and Ruganda, having mentioned 5 people, the list ends there. Is that something to be particularly proud of? I think not. I think that is the challenge. And that was my opening line. Let me see, what's the time, Michael? I want to stick to what's the time? 6:49. 6:15 plus 30 equals. I should have stopped. Well, I should be stopping soon. So I should be stopping soon. I want to say again that one of the challenges that we must have is to have whatever the Japanese or whatever did, I think that the unity first has to be homegrown. I really do think that Africans should work and stick together first before we attempt, which is our current desire, which is to end up winning an Oscar in Hollywood. I don't think that ought to be our destination. I think we ought to be doing stuff that means stuff to fellow Africans and having a repertoire that other people want to see. Now that seems exclusionary, you know, what's happening, but the thing is, good people, there isn't a terrible effort being made to include our work in the repertoire of the global north. I have made students of mine, people who've acted in my place, have taken my scripts to places like the Royal Court or whatever it is and said, would they be seen by some director and perhaps put in the UK? And the answer was, what this man is doing and the approach to theatre that he is adopting is like 30 years out of date in terms of the vocabulary of Western theatre. So, by the same token, if, as I've seen, we have had in KidFest 2024, we have had a show from Germany, I believe, that had to do with artificial intelligence. I don't know if you saw it. It had sort of like a vacuum cleaner that was going up and down and being given. And I thought to myself, if I took this to Busia County and put it on as is, and I've got very few aunties and left because, you know, I'm the auntie now. I'm the one who's on my way out. So, but I was just thinking, I do have an auntie, and I said, you know, Auntie Beatrice, and she says, hey, mwana. She comes and sits and sees that vacuum cleaner play. She won't understand what it's about. And my friend Stuart said to me, he's given me a wonderful conduit to watch British plays on National Theatre at home. And I watched Vanya with a celebrated English actor, a monologue. And it was sold out. He was the best actor. But I couldn't understand it. You know why? Because the vocabulary being used, the theatrical vocabulary that was being used, was alien to what I'm used to. You know, it's a bit like a dance move. People say you should go left and right, you know, kick a thing here, but you don't know how to do that particular dance. So in other words, part of telling our own story, we have to start off by creating our own theatrical vocabulary that other people can't understand. Do you know what I'm saying? We understand it. Our illusions make sense to us. But we have to sit next to Tien or whoever's sitting next to us and say to her, you know what they're doing? It's a bit like me going off to China and watching some kabuki, which I've never done, or no theater. It's been there for ages. And kabuki, you're meant to have a guy who's like 100 like me, keeping their body in sprightly shape and still being able to move their body as though they were 12-year-olds. Now, I have not seen kabuki. I have not seen no theater. But I'm sure maybe Ogutu, you know, in your studies, you've become familiar with it. But I do think that there's something to be said for creating our own vocabulary. So, good people, of the challenge to improve our craft, and this is you're soon going to have another cue to clap rapturously when I say thank you, and then we'll go into the Q&A. But so be ready for the rapturous applause. With our craft, as regard to our craft, I do believe that talent without training is not enough. So we really have to think deeply about creating our own theatre schools and developing our own theatrical language. The time, Africa's renaissance, Africa's time, if it's not to be just a lip service idea, has to be about things being done differently. It's sort of like a no-brainer. I can't, I mean, I could regale you all day with to be or not to be, that is the question, but whether it is noble in the mind and what a show-off, you know, you can recite Shakespeare, but I've got to be able to recite something else. and I've got to be able to recite somebody from a playwright from Malawi, and I've got to be able to have as a stepping stone a playwright from Zimbabwe, and it's a must. It's not a dereliction, it's not a rejection of the other, it's just sort of like having your own recipes for people to taste at the buffet. There's nothing wrong with it. With the notion of content, our challenge to ourselves and to others is to have a record of the shows that are put on. We have a group here called Heartstrings Kenya, perhaps the best satirical look at our society that exists to date, but I'd really be challenged if Sami Mwangi could go back and give me the script for the last 300 shows that they put on. They don't exist. So if they don't exist, then our children can't do them in school. Remember my school days when we had our competitions? They can't have the luck that I have. I had the luck of learning on the ground. Now I think I ought to be taught, and I want a selection of material that speaks to me. Community. We in Kenya have developed what is called a devolved system of government, meaning that you have little boundaries. Now, creatively, the devolved system of government works against a feeling of national cohesion, because I, from Busia County, am going to make sure that my county is supposedly superior to Murang'a County, to Nyeri County, not talking about the bloody Ugandans and the Tanzanians. So you can see this great sort of underground agenda to divide, whereas creatives are, by definition, creatives are kindred spirits. They're all a bit different. We're all a bit weird, as they were saying in the US elections. We're all a bit like, who was weird in the US the other day? Donald Trump, yeah. But we're all a bit weird. So I think we have to address this issue of ethnicity and tribalism. I've said this before, Michael. We've got to make sure that whatever ends up on our national stage has been translated. We're not saying we can't have plays in my mother tongue, or Lunyala, my father tongue, or Lusamia, Lunyolo, or Lumaragoli. All these things are wonderful things. Let's do it. But by the time we've created, for those who have children who understand these languages, such has been the transition that my own children don't speak my mother tongue. So I'm not going to sort of say I want a gold medal about it, but maybe they're more Kenyan than the rest. They're more Gen Z, because they speak Swahili and English. And you know what? Swahili and English are the national and official languages of this country, and they're Kenyan. So let creators in the villages, creators, whatever, create in their mother tongue, and let's set up, government has a big role to play, to set up an institute that makes these plays translatable so that they can be seen by an audience that understands, or that they can be done, Michael, so that every production is in Luo, but we have surtitles at the top there. That's what happens when the Japanese and people go off to the Royal Shakespeare Company. We have to be able to understand our output. Country, we call upon the state not only to subsidize us and try to help us, but not to fling us in jail every time we do something that says, you know, the other day we ought to be writing a play about Gen Zs. Are we proud of the fact that a month ago, 2 days ago, we were letting the police with live bullets to shoot our kids in the streets and shoot them dead? Is that something to be proud of as a society? Now, should I say that on a platform like this and be expecting somebody to lead me out for interrogation for having said so? That is not the kind of society that we want. That is not what a democratic society ought to be about. So we need help from government. We need support from government. We realize that we're poor countries. We realize that we live for a great part on foreign aid. We realize that we don't have hospitals. We realize that we don't have enough schools. But I'd much rather say, let's not buy another F-27 or a MiG-26, some fighter pilot that goes off on sort of national celebrations and goes bzzz and uses 1,000 liters of petrol, but couldn't really sustain a war of any length with any country that's got more, you know what I'm saying? If the Egyptians wanted to take us to the cleaners, it could be done in half an hour. So I'm really glad, sorry for us, we've got fighter pilot kin in their families. We don't need that stuff. We should tell the Japanese or the Taiwanese to look after us and inject that money into the arts. So, lastly, continent, I really think that the time has come for Africans to pull together. And my challenge to the visitors here is get me a free ticket to come to your country and speak to you there. And with that, I thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, what I thought would be a really good thing is to have some responses, and this can go on as long as you like. I think, but as I began, I would like, I don't see that many of them here to tell you the truth, but I would like our guests to respond in whatever fashion to what I've said. Maybe it's been so trite and inconsequential that they've immediately forgotten about it. But if there's something that, if you are a guest to KitFest, I'd really like to hear from you first. And at this point, again, we envisage this with the organizers, with Kevin and Gobia and Oluwal and Fiona. I said, it might not seem that way, but I don't like the sound of my voice that much. But I do like intellectual debate, and I do like the idea of ideas. So I hope I've provoked you in some way to say something about how what I've said relates to what you do. And then we'll just let the microphone go around and let the energy fizzle out, and then find out where we can have a glass of water. I've got my own here. It's my favorite drink. So, sir, this gentleman is from Uganda. So just again, dictatorial teacher that I am, I'm going to conduct my own Q&A session. I don't need any help. Could you be the first to go? Your name, and please say that you're from the moon or Mars or somewhere really far away.
I got you. Good evening. Good evening to you all. My name is Cyrus Bugaba Clinton Clive Kranmachsude Chividige, and I'm from Uganda. I have a performance tomorrow at 5 p.m. with the Citizen Ken Collective. So my question is, have you given up?
It doesn't have to be a question, it can be a comment.
Okay, it's kind of both.
Yes.
I can neither deny nor confirm what it is, but I do not know if you've given up on the different countries that you've wrote to, the directors to the different countries that you've wrote to. I don't know if you've written to some of the Ugandan directors, but if you've not yet given up on them, is there a possibility that we can arrange probably where you can probably come and we try to stage a play also? Because there is a creeping syndrome with Ugandan directors / producers in theater that they're starting to do off-Broadway musicals and, these celebrated plays in the European countries. Forgive me if you're from there, but I mean, you put up very good plays, so people want to probably do them back home. But if it's possible, as we're also trying to write our own plays, if it's possible for you to come, I do not know. So my question is it still possible for you to come if we probably write to you and invite you, and we could put up such a show?
Yeah. And, I think from what I've said, I would really welcome that.
Amen.
And I would also welcome our own. We have the CEO of the theatre here. This is food for him. I think I don't know. All these things cost money, don't they, Millicent? All these things cost money. There is the dislocation between desire and funding. I'm not a complete twit. I can appreciate that, but I'm just saying more of an effort ought to be made. More of an effort ought to be made for us to see theatrical productivity from other countries. So I was thoroughly intrigued to see the play from Germany, the play from, I was here the whole of something, South Africa, the husband and wife couple. I was just saying, well, this is what are they dealing with? And I said, what does it remind me of? Is it the theatre of the absurd? Is this a sort of retread? What inspired that couple to come up with that show about marriage? And then we had a show from Kenya about reproductive rights, which I found very intriguing. But you can only get ideas from watching other people do what you're trying to do. And those choices are crucial. And stepping down, because we are not in Kenya and not exposing our children to the theatre and to its possibilities. So by definition, it won't survive. I told you my own, potted history, because I'm steeped, I'm a member of the religion because of luck. But it's not just me, because of, somebody else has to find the fascination of trying to pretend to be somebody else, to enter into somebody other human skin, to write as though one were another human being, unbesotted by oneself. So yes, an exchange of addresses as we drink our glass of water. Foreigners, the pronunciation here is foreigners. Are there any foreigners? Are there any foreigners who have to say anything? And by the way, I was set to moderate a masterclass about the state of global theatre on Friday. And with the organizers, for those here present, we're going to change the title of that, because many of the foreign participants have gone back home. So we can't have that as a topic when 5 of the panelists are from Africa. So we will be addressing this idea of cross-pollination within countries and within continents. So for those of you from the UK on the panel, you'll be telling us whether you've seen something that we ought to learn from you. That is a conversation that I can sustain for an hour. I don't think I can moderate a conversation for an hour about the state of global theatre, for the simple reason that I don't know what it is. Any other responses?
Good evening, everyone, and Mwalimu. Thank you for such a wonderful address. But Mwalimu, I need your help. Listening to you, I've realized that maybe you could answer a question that I have that maybe could help me and everyone else in the room. So I'm known to champion the inclusion of technology and the digital tools that we have today into the practice of theater or the performing arts at large. And mostly what that sounds like to anyone listening, and especially because it's not everyone's cup of tea, understandably so, and especially the artists, tunajijua, we just want to do what we've always done, and we want to do it to the best of our ability, and we are passionate about that. But then anyone responding back always says, or tends to insinuate that what I'm saying or what I'm championing is that we should stop being Kenyans and who we are, stop being Africans, and then just follow the white man's route. I try to challenge them and tell them we are living in this world. Everything we have are these lights. These are not our technologies. The printing, these banners there, the inks and the printers, everything around us, our phones, it's not us, but we live in this world. And what we do, we are at this disadvantage where the economies that run our businesses, our revenue channels, our tools of trade, they all rely on these foreign inventions and technologies that we are always trying to almost like catch up with these technologies and the foreigners, so much that when we take these shortcuts and sacrifices, mostly what we lose is our identities. And it has been difficult for me to be able to explain that as much as we're here and we want to embrace technology and the digital space, we want to use this to our advantage to tell our stories, no matter how difficult it is for you to trend with a Luya play on TikTok. No matter how difficult it is for you to really get the recognition, and this is in the sense of recognition in comparison or using the foreign standard as the mode of measurement. So I get this challenge of trying to explain that what I'm championing is not that, but rather just taking advantage of the times we find ourselves in to be able to be louder, just be more bold and passionate about who we are and telling our own stories. So what would you tell me I should respond each time I get these responses? In your perspective, in your experiences, borrowing from your journey that you've had, what is it that I can say when I'm doing today I had a master class. I didn't have the question today, but in case it came up in future conversations, what is that thing that I can actually just tell people that this is not what I'm saying, we just still need to tell our stories, and then how do I convince them that they can still belong in 2024, quote unquote, but still be able to be who they are as Kenyans and Africans?
That's a difficult question, and I'm not going to present myself as a sage, but I will comment on what you said, and that is, we're coming and going. Your digital expertise is something that I know very little about. Therefore, I can see the need to adopt it as part of the storytelling process. What I do know, and it might end soon, is that the great difference between the theater and other forms of performance, or similarity to maybe dance, is it involves real live people. I know as a playwright that when I've gone to ChatGPT and said, Mau Mau play which I'm writing, can I set a scene in a police station in 1952 Kenya between a torturer and the Mau Mau? And you know, if you've used ChatGPT, I switch on the button and it comes out immediately with a suggested script. Now, I could, I suppose, present that to the National Theatre and say this is my Mau Mau play. And because AI is a distillation of everything that's ever been written, it's got everything. Does that mean that I, as a playwright, am going to become obsolete? I don't think so, because the one thing that I can bring to it is my individual subjective take on my subject matter. So what you should be telling the people who are saying we could do this with digital technology, to tell your own story, is that you have got to put yourself into all these things that you've said are imported from abroad. These are tools. It's like a djembe, it's like a combine harvester. They're tools. But I'm saying, are we going to spend the rest of our living days redoing the classics of the canon of the global north without creating anything that is our own? Because it presumes that we cannot do anything of like quality. And certainly, in my time here, in Kenya, over the last 50 years as a performer, we have undoubtedly produced plays and productions which are world class. It's just a fact. They don't have the exposure, but you have this, I think there's a sort of inferiority complex thing going on there, and that's what you have to fight against. And surely, the inferiority complex should be greater for somebody of my generation than for somebody of yours. You know, I don't want my kids to be as windy and fearful as I am. I want them to be more vibrant and you know, gung-ho and boisterous, and let's take over the joint. So generationally, I can't tell you what to do. I'm just saying, let's do something that has your imprimatur on it, that has Ogutru's imprimatur on it, and let us grow to love it and to do it all over again and embrace it. First of all, in our little country setting, because we've got to go by stages. Next time I come for a festival, I want to incinerate my Kenya colors and hope that there is a designer here who has a scarf that represents the continent. If there's an African flag, I'll tell you one thing, I'll be the first to wear it. Because I think that point of pride is the only starting point that we've got. I hope I've answered your question somewhat elaborately.
Hi, so my name is Wandiri Karimi, and I was a facilitator for the program that Kid Fest ran in the counties. And I'm really grateful to Olwal and the team for thinking outside the box. Fedari, I know this program started when you were here. But I think we should encourage ourselves to think the way you're talking about. I'm seated with my father, who is turning 78 in Feb, and I am my father's dream. And I say this because he was here in 1963 on this stage, and he brought me here for plays, and then I ended up in the music space, but now also the theater space. So in terms of craft, I think there's so much skill. This is my experience in the counties. There's so much skill in the country. There's so many ideas that people want to bring out. I was in Embu County and Kisumu County, and there is no limit to what we can do. The audio play program, and I hope you do get to listen to some of these plays. There were collaborative works, and there were people from different counties working together, even though there were, so for example, in Embu County, we had people from Uasin Gishu who live there, and they were working with people from Meru County. So it is actually possible. Your dream is already happening at KidFest 2024. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Sorry, may I ask my Ugandan brother, son, grandson, to tell me the name of the 3 foremost Ugandan playwrights of our times? Give him a microphone. Name them, because I just wanted to name names. I know. Sorry? You yourself being one of them, of course.
Well, that could be a hard paper, but I think one is Alex Mukulu. Two,
Yes,
of your time, of our time.
Anytime.
Okay, anytime. Alex Mukulu, I have
I was mentioning him, but I got his first name wrong. I said Charles. I should have said Alex.
You'd have.
Alex has been around.
Actually, there is also Dr. Charles Mulekwa, Philip Luswata, Aganza Chisaka. Okay, that's already 3. I could go on and on.
Okay, that's enough. Is there any other African country here where you can name me some theatrical greats? Maybe we've only got Ugandans here. Okay, now I guess we can hear more from...
Then I think I also know Gutu Muraya. So.
Yes. You should preface that by saying the great Ogutu Murai.
Thank you, Mwalimu. Obviously, my name is Michael Pundo. Thank you for the story you've given us. You've been a great storyteller, and I think you are becoming greater. Ogutu Muraya should learn from you. He's also trying, though. Yeah, but listening to your story, first, it turns out that you are really a privileged child.
Yes. I think I said that.
Yes, you did.
But I also said that I wish that others might share the same privilege.
Exactly.
I don't want to be sort of latter-day savior with the disciples and things.
But also a very lucky child. But I don't think whatever turns out is purely luck, because then, despite the fact that you had the opportunity, you were not alone in the whole set. You must have also shown traits of preparedness. And so what turns out then is that for you to stand out is not a matter of sheer luck, but then opportunity must meet preparedness for you to stand out. And that is why, despite the opportunities you got, you are prepared to be identified. But having said that, you have also mentioned, okay, on a light note, that you are born around the same time with certain prominent people who are richer than you. But I think, and it's in the mind of all of us here, you should blame your father for this. For having removed you from the plains of Busia
Yes.
and taking you to North London.
Yes.
And then bringing you back again after only 3 years was not fair enough. And I think that is where nyota yako ilipotea. But anyway.
Yeah, but you see, Michael, the weird thing is that if different, it's all about choices. In the Kenya of the 60s, had my father chosen, as he could have, if he wasn't a Pan-Africanist, had he chosen to take up British citizenship, he would have had it, and I would now be presenting myself here as a proud Brit. Uke uba Alice. But I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I could have been a Brit. There are many Kenyans of my generation who stayed in the UK and are Brits.
Yes, but having said that, now on a serious note, you have talked about telling our story, and it is something we've been trying to sensitize our writers about our story. The problem has been, and again, out of this comment, you might find what to say, whether it's a question or a comment of that. The problem has been that what we have continued to see on stage have been adaptations mostly of plays that have been written, of Western plays mostly that have written, or the writers have chosen to go by the models of Western writers. What in your perception would be the problem? Is it that, and this is something I've said, is it that currently we have a crop of lazy writers, or we have stopped being creative? Secondly, you have also mentioned that about when you're talking about what should be on stage, and it's something we have also grappled with as an institution. And the question has been, what actually should be landing on the national theatre stage? And from where I sit at the institution, anybody, any artist, any producer who has 40,000 or 60,000 to pay will put anything on that stage, however mediocre it is. But we are also struggling with maintaining the stature of a national theatre. So in your own imagination and wisdom, how then, as an institution or as an industry, would we find to sheave out what would be put on the national stage such that it represents the stature of a national theatre, and also things.
Remember, the old forget easily, so don't put too many questions to me.
And I'm just finalizing, and so that we have our story being told, but in such a way that it is told in a way that everybody else would appreciate and identify with, but also with substance and some level of credibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, we discuss these things on a regular basis. I think I was, again, having a conversation with my friend Stuart, and I've said more than once that there is nothing wrong with imitation. I think that I was saying maybe we should have a club that happens and where we would see world theatre the same way that people listen to TED Talks on a weekly basis. We could gather here to see a presentation of Three Sisters. We could gather here to see Hamlet. The fact that we are not going to reinvent the wheel, this whole sort of Peter Brook notion of the empty space is that a performer finds a space, pulls out a snake, shows it to people, and people gather round to see the performance. That is the basic, that is the ingredient. What we are saying in terms of telling our own story is to transfer technique to our context. So, for example, if the other day we did Molière's The Imaginary Invalid or The Hypochondriac and did it here, people enjoyed that show, people enjoyed that performance, but it was embraced by a Kenyan audience in a way that people who weren't alive to the Kenyan context would have been a bit confused. Do you see what I'm saying? So whatever Gadwell or Dhiambo did to make the play, it's transference of technique to context, not taking it willy-nilly. That is creation. So, for example, in my travels, I was in New York somewhere, and I saw a play about the Arab, sort of like the United States going into Kuwait and invading and people. And the understanding was that people who were in the play were speaking in Arabic. And they couldn't sustain the whole play with the dialogue going through in Arabic. So they started off slowly for us watching with the dialogue going on in a language that we didn't understand. And then somehow the people were saying, I'm feeling rather tired and I need a glass of water. And we worked out as an audience that that's what they were doing. So when I wrote Kagia, having seen that technique, I wanted to establish the fact that Bildad Kagia, a character in Kenyan history, and his wife Wamboi were conducting a conversation entirely in Kikuyu, in Gikuyu. But I didn't want it to sound as if they would spend the whole 40 minutes saying, oh, the sun has risen today, how are your cows, how are your sheep, what is the chief of, you know, which was a kind of 1960s black hermit and Ngugi wa Thiong'o approach to dialogue. I wanted their conversation to be as subtle. So I copied the guys that I'd seen in New York. Wamboi and Bildad Kagia start talking in Gikuyu, and by several sentences down, they're now switched to English. The understanding, the audience is not thick. They worked out that Kagia and his wife spoke to each other in their mother tongue. Problem solved. But it was not an original idea. I copied it. And I could say that the same. If I look at William Shakespeare, I know, or go to, that Shakespeare must have worked out that the audience doesn't necessarily become into the play instantly. So you can't have a thing where somebody comes and says, oh, my mother's just died in the first line. Each play will start off and say, the feud. Do you bite your thumb? Do you bite your thumb? Do you bite your thumb at me? I do bite my thumb, but I do not bite. And then there's a big sort of marketplace, free-for-all mayhem, as people in support of the Capulets go head-to-head with people in support of the Montagues. But if you come in 10 minutes late into that performance, you still get the idea that you've been rolled into the story gently. You can still get into it. And Shakespeare does that with every play. Merchant of Venice, people just sort of sitting by the thing, talking about their things. And then someone said, I've got a huge debt, and if I don't pay it, things are going to get out of hand. The beginning of the Merchant of Venice. Julius Caesar. So those are techniques. And if we go back into the training, I, as a teacher in playwriting, ought to be able to teach my students to kill those 5 minutes with sort of scintillating rubbish. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a technique. It's not to say that we are going to abandon tried and tested methods of production. The person who is downstage in a hall, the person who is down here because of the laws of perspective, the king is always going to be down here because that's where every eye is going to. If I'm going to place my characters and there's somebody looking on as a director, I'm going to put that person here. That is just the laws of perspective. It's got nothing to do with race, and it can be taught. Do you know what I'm saying? So we have talented young people. They need to be taught, and somebody should give Ogutu Muraya a well-paying job where he can drive around in an SUV, teaching our kids how to direct plays. That is my birthday wish for him. Sorry, there was another prong to your... You engaged me on, Michael. The idea I have said, because I've got a loud voice and I'm ranting and raving, I have said from the days when I was a member of the Council of the National Theatre that the idea of calling this the Kenyan National Theatre is also a relic of colonial times. We should chinja mbuzi, a cow, a goat, and rename it a name that doesn't carry so much baggage. It should be the Harry Thuku Lane Theatre. The minute you call it the National Theatre, it becomes the standard bearer of national quality. And therefore, maybe 50% of the shows that get put on here shouldn't be put on here because they do not represent what it is to be the National Theatre of Great Britain. So we shouldn't be imitating things like that. We should have smaller theatres and just change the baggage. It doesn't have to be the Kenya National Theatre, ba-bam. It just has to be a building in which people perform. And it's a great leap backward, but it is also reassessing in 1959, when the Kenya National Theatre was built, it was built to be a home for classics of the British canon. And if you look at the design, it was built in exactly the same way as the Uganda National Theatre, barring maybe a staircase or two. So we had the same architect, built a building here, called it the Kenya National Theatre, built a building in Kampala, called it the Kampala National Theatre, but did in Tanzania. So if we're going back in time and we're asking for African solutions to African problems, we should also build a place and build another theatre. 60 years on, maybe the government should find a plot of land somewhere in the Masai Mara and build a huge 50-dome theatre somewhere there. That's what, when I went to the Cairo festival to be feted and honored and lauded, that's what the Egyptians do, but the Egyptians are very rich. But the Egyptians are doing things like, oh, we're fed up with Cairo as it always has been. We're going to build a new capital, 40 kilometers away. They are doing things like, they had a museum, wonderful museum. They had all these sort of Egyptian mummies and things, or whatever, bung in the middle of Cairo. They went and built another one, better, brighter, bigger, somewhere else. But it stems from a belief in the arts. We are at a point where we're sort of saying, we're STEM people, everybody's got to be a computer programmer. We can't all spend our lives programming bloody computers. Do you know what I'm saying? There has to be an examination of the human soul. People have to be able to read, listen to music, listen to dance in their spare time. They can't just be twiddling around with gadgets all the time. And that kind of, it's a no-brainer. It means that government, the state, has to be a committed supporter of the arts. That is my belief. You're free to disagree with it.
I had thoughts. Four thoughts.
And people are beginning to walk out. So let this be the last. Please don't walk out. Oh, come back. Stay. Oh. They walked out. Let this be the last question.
I believe there isn't a single story for all audiences. So even as we think about telling our own stories, there isn't one story. The story, I think it should be, you think backwards, who's your intended audience, and then you create for them a story that resonates with them. I may not, I enjoy it the same way, like with film. The Nigerians have their market with their puffs of smoke and things like that. I had a friend who used to watch Nigerian movies all the time, and I'd judge her. I'm like, you just watch witchcraft. But then I used to watch Charmed, and then she told me, oh, you like it when it's white people, because it's the same thing. But there's, so different audiences have different tastes and what appeals to them. So there can't be one single story for the African or the Kenyan. there's different things. Whatever will appeal to your Aunt Beatrice will not appeal to Fedari's audience or his age mates or to my kids who are teenagers, and they want something that's quick, short, and that will keep their attention. They don't take too much time. But I think depending on age, location, and all that, so there can be many different approaches to telling our own stories, because it's not just one story. And then my other thought was, I think the process of creating compelling stories is not an easy one. So when Pundo asked, what do we do to get the quality of productions that you can stand behind and be proud of, there has to be a constant, consistent pride in the work that we do as theater practitioners, where you put in the time, you put in the work, you do the research, you learn what has made other performances great, and then you take what works for you and give up the rest. But I think right now everyone wants like a microwave approach, where it's quick, fast, we put it up and we hope that the audience comes and watches it. So we need to encourage a lot more practitioners to take pride in putting in the work and doing something amazing and great. And I think that's maybe part of what's missing. And then my third thought before the last one was the way you've taken us through your first 45 minutes. I would pay to come and sit and listen to you. So I think we should start thinking more outside the box and say...
Doing this full time? You want me to do this full time, baby? Okay.
Yeah, because they're called living libraries, where you go, you pay to speak to a person. So you have a list of certain people who you would like to come and listen to because their stories have been presented before. So
Michael, you're listening to this, you owe me a fee, baby, for doing this.
Yes.
Which hasn't been offered so far.
The same way we're listening to the audio stories on the other side. So you have 5 individuals who have great stories, and we come and we sit and we pay and we sit and we listen to you telling us all these great stories about your life, about the theater, about culture and all this stuff, and then we keep the history alive and we can constantly listen. And my last thought was, out of all your age mates, including Oprah, you're the most handsome.
Millicent, on a serious note, the Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's, there's a great post there about the whatever of the single story. And it's trending and it's been seen, and nothing could be more right. What I'm saying is that the gist, we talked to challenges to the Kenyan stage. I have been a production consultant in a show that was sponsored by the French, and Stuart Nash directed it. I've mentioned his name 3 times, so he owes me a drink. The French were keen for us to do a Molière. Every single year, they have sponsored a production of a French classic. We started off with L'Avare, the greedy man, which we called Mistingy. We followed it with Ennui's Antigone. We followed it last year with Cyrano de Bergerac, about the guy with the long nose who writes nice love letters to his girlfriend. We followed it this year with The Hypochondriac. I'm just saying, part of the path, as I asked my Ugandan brethren, is to be able to be proud to present similar productions. So that if you were Kenya's High Commissioner Plenipotentiary to London, you would invite people to Kenya House every year to come and see Betrayal in the City. Every other story, there are different types of entertainment. There's going to be pantomime, there's just dancing around, things for Christmas and everything else, but there is something that can belong to a national canon, and that has to be worked at. It has to be consecrated, Millicent. So, and there's a process that does that. Of course, nobody's going to agree with you more that you need to be prepared to do what you do. Hence, the appeal to finding a place where you can hone your skills and be aware of what you're doing in order to present it. And thank you. I'm going to continue using my gels and tonics to remain beautiful. Thank you. I think with that, thank you so much for your time. I think
One more.
Yes, sorry?
Sorry,
Yes.
one more here.
Yes, do. I'm
Yeah.
not chasing anybody away. Sorry, one more question.
So I think I'll just speak on from what Millicent has speaked on and
Yes.
what the previous signer suit talked on. Do you believe, or what would your comment be about the microwave situation she has given? Because, for example, you have talked about support, but when I think about it, when you wrote your previous plays, when you wrote plays years ago, did you know they'd be performed 20 years later? Do you think right now with the current trend of writers we have, will we have a play that was written in 2024 by a Kenyan writer performed in 2050? Or, because when I think about it, when you talk about, for example, the Gen Z protests, we've not seen any Kenyan writer put it on stage. You can mention the fear of being arrested when they walk out of this door, but we had Ngoge put things on this stage, get arrested. Years later, we are still staging his plays, and it's beautiful. So I'm wondering, what would you say about the current state of how we are writing? Do we have the backbone to write plays that will stand the test of time? Are we confident enough to be true to our stories and express them and put them on stage?
Thank you for that concern. The unequivocal answer, and Michael is here to hear it, everything, the P word is process, moving with intent. When I hear that the organizers of KidFest 2024 are organizing a drama competition and that they're going to stage 10 of the plays that would be winning plays from that competition next year, surely that is a great leap forward. And when I first heard of that initiative, I said, oh gosh, I'd like to write a play of my own and put it into that competition and win. But I said, you know, my time has come and gone. I don't want to sort of like be competing with the Gen Zs to see whether I'm the best playwright amongst them at all. It has to, the baton has to be passed on to those who are younger. You know what I'm saying? So one of the reasons why it's a great pride to me to be able to address a gathering such as this is that I'm addressing people who biologically are young enough to be my children. So the same way I would tell my own children, you know, how to conduct their finances, you know, don't blow all your pocket money on a cache of marijuana. This could be advice that could be unheeded. It could be advice that goes totally unheeded, but one voice is talking to another generation. And the other thing that happens generationally is that a lot of things that our parents believed in has been superseded by the passage of time. It's no longer relevant. But the play that we did by the French was written in 1670, Le Malade Imaginaire. Molière collapsed in a heap on the last performance of Le Malade Imaginaire. Hamlet, Shakespeare, 1640. These stories still exist to this day. Wakio Mzenge, sitting next to you, has just done the 4th production of a play that I wrote in my collected plays. I don't boast, but each and every play that I wrote between 2004 and 2014 has been produced at least 4 times by different people. And they're not people that I paid a huge sum of money to go and produce them. Because they existed, remember the idea of existence? Because they existed, Wakio bought a copy of this book. I did not urge her to buy it. So many months later, she obviously can read a play from cover to cover. She read all of them and rang me up and said, can I do the one-hander called Elements? And it was tear-jerkingly touching to come and see that play brought to life in a way that I said, oh, that's not bad. Yeah, I wrote that. It's okay. But you cannot have the selfishness and the audacity to presume that you are the only person who does what you do. And when people call me Mwalimu, what does Mwalimu mean in Kiswahili? It means teacher. So I have spent my whole life teaching people how to kick ass with stuff that I know about. You know what I'm saying? so that my French pupils are bloody good French speakers. You know what? Because I taught them how to manipulate the French language. You know what I'm saying? And I worked at being a good teacher. I worked at it. And I looked at their grades and I said, how many C's and A's have we got this year? I am saying, I'm encouraging more of us to do the same. I'm encouraging Michael to invite David Mulwa in his wheelchair to speak to us. I'm encouraging him to bring Edwin Nyutho. I'm encouraging us to hear the voice of Mumbi Kaigwa. We're not in competition with these people. They're generational, whatever it is. I just happen to be the oldest of them all. Okay. Goodbye. Rapturous applause. Rapturous applause. This is the theatrical way. And one on the side here. I want a picture with Michael. I want a picture with Michael. All the heavies from the thing. Michael, I want a picture with you to send to the Martians. This is the CEO of the theater. If I have a picture with him, he could pay me some money. Michael, thank you for inviting me. Do we have a cameraman?
Where's the camera? Oh, Sini as always.
Thank you very much for coming, folks. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you for staying for so long and not walking out on my show.
You have a seat.
Yeah.
Sign the books that have been bought.
Oh, yeah. I will sign the books that are being bought. That's a good thing. I could come out of here rich. 10 double whiskies. Or should I sign out there? Should I sign out there? Okay.
They will come.
Okay, so book signing here, and I don't want to stay too long. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
I feel like embracing you. You're speaking on our behalf. We shall not give up.